to really express how I was feeling. And I just didn't want to look like a failure. I've always hated looking like a failure. So this person comes up to me and is like, hey, I love you. I want to get married. And I'm like, you know what? Sure, no problem. It's not like anybody else is looking at me. And this is the way to secure for the rest of my life that I'll have somebody who, loves me unconditionally and that I can start a family with. And it's different. It's different. It's a heady feeling in the moment. And then when it happens, you just regret it. And it's more like, oh my God, I made my bed. Now I have to lay in it. What really pushed me to get out of that marriage was, one, he almost put his hands on me. Two, I knew I wasn't in love with him anyway. And when I came to terms with myself that the person that I was really in love with was my kid's father, I got divorced because I wanted to give it a shot. So I didn't have the support system that I wanted, and I didn't have anybody to really tell me. I mean, me and my mother's experiences with pregnancy were so different. I was still dealing with coming back home and being the person that I am now after getting out of the service. My life was different. My day-to-day was different. I went from being a nurse and being at the hospital every day to now being home and pregnant and doing nothing and unemployed. And I had finished my degree, but I wasn't doing absolutely anything with it. So when we get back from the break, I will delve a little bit more into that. But right now, let's take a short one. All right. And we are back from the break. So like I was saying before, I didn't really have the support system that I wanted. And I was coming home from the service and I was still dealing to adjusting from life. And I think, to be honest, that I was struggling with depression from coming home. So kind of a little bit timeline on that. I got pregnant, or I got separated. I got pregnant. I got divorced. I ended my career in the military. I came home. I decided to go back to school, get on unemployment. I finished my degree, all with maybe 3 months to spare until I had my baby. So I was already in a place where I was like, God, what am I going to do? And things weren't working out the way that I wanted to at all. And I just knew that having this baby was going to hit me hard. So I wasn't eating the way that I should. I didn't have morning sickness, but I wasn't eating the way that I should. And I was eating like Frosted Flakes and vegetables for like maybe the first 6 months. And then I finally started showing, which was great. But then I got like this weird patch of like dead skin almost. Like, oh God, that sounds nasty. No, it wasn't like that. It was like this square on my belly that I could not feel anything. You could have poked it, you could have stabbed it, you could have done whatever you wanted with it, and I wouldn't have felt anything. It was the creepiest thing ever. So eventually, like her kicks were like muted. And towards the end, I found out that I had low fluid levels, and she was she was like cramped in there, like saran wrapped in there. So I went back for like 2 monitoring checks, and they was like, you absolutely have to have your baby. I was not ready for that at all. It was the scariest thing that I had ever heard, because in my mind I was like, oop, complications. So the day before I'm scheduled to have her, I start buying everything that I needed. Like literally, I'm like, oh my God, I'm moving back home with my mom. I need to set everything up. I had, her dad come over and set up the crib and all of this. By the end of the day, we were so exhausted. And still the next day, I didn't have any clothes for my baby. I didn't have any, I didn't have the car seat installed. I was supposed to be at the hospital at 5:00. And I swear to you, I was installing the car seat. Actually, I was still in line at Babies R Us at 3:30. So I'm panicking because I'm like, God, I'm going to be late. I didn't have time to wash the clothes that I bought because I was like, looking online, and I was like, oh, you got to when you buy the clothes, you got to wash them. So the baby, sensitive skin, blah, blah, blah. And everything that I got about what I needed to do, I got from Google and from like Baby Center. So I'm sitting there kind of panicking a bit because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I went to the fire station, and they're like, we can't do checks on the car seats, and they just closed the door on me. So I'm sitting there on the curb, super pregnant with what I think is a very sick baby, and I'm panicking. So my family comes over, like my mom and my cousin and my aunt. They come over and they come with me to the hospital, and I think my dad comes too. And my best friend, she was still living in the Bronx at the time. I think she had like just moved to Brooklyn, or was about to move to Brooklyn, and she came to see me in the hospital. So at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they're like, okay, we're going to put in the Pitocin and we're going to put in the Cervidil. I was like, okay, great. My baby was already having D cells. And they sat there encouraging me more than anybody's business to have a C-section. And I was like, nope, nope, nope. Absolutely nobody is cutting me open. And it's like we entered at that moment a stalemate. Mind you, this is Tuesday, 5 o'clock. Over the next couple of days, I had the Pitocin, I had the Cervidil. They broke my water. It did not force any contractions. They tried to pop the bag again to see if that would trigger something. It didn't happen. I had so many hands up my no zone, up my vagina, that I swear to God, I would have made an adult film star jealous. I had 4 cervical balloons. Yes, 4, and that sounds exactly like what you think it is. So when they put a catheter attached to a balloon, I believe it's a Foley catheter, and they put it up your cervix and they blow it up in an attempt to dilate your body. By like Thursday morning, I was so exhausted and so sore and in so much pain. They're like, you need something to take the edge off, to take the pain off. I hadn't gotten an epidural. You need something to take the edge off, because your body is literally it's so tense from the pain that it will not relax in order for this to happen. And you need to have a C-section. Absolutely not. You guys, something you're going to learn about me. Super stubborn as shit. I was like, no, nobody's cutting into me. Felt myself getting weak. And I thank my kid's dad for pulling me back from that, because at some point I was like, damn, is a C-section really the right thing to do? But I was being stubborn, and my mom was mad at me because she, I remember her making a statement that I was very upset about. She was like, I hope that you don't hurt your child because you didn't want you're opting to not have a C-section. There's nothing wrong with that. I had 2 C-sections. And I'm like, that's great for you. That's not something that I want for me. I'm absolutely terrified of going under the knife. And I've worked in labor and delivery before, and that's not to say that they're bad at their job, but I just couldn't risk any additional complications. I had a lot of other things going on in my life. The day before I went into the hospital, I'm living with my kid's dad, and the day after, after I get out of this hospital, I'm going to go live with my mom. It was a lot to handle and a lot to take in already. And then I'm supposed to just, deal with surgery. And the thought of doing that alone freaked me out. My mom worked. It's not like she was going to stay home with me. So it was a lot to take in, and I couldn't handle that. So I was like, absolutely not. I'm doing this naturally. This is the way that I wanted to. Nothing about my life at that moment was the way that I wanted it to be. And I was going to be damned if bringing my child into this world was going to be just another thing that wasn't the way that I wanted it to be. And I would be lying if I said I don't think that contributed to what I was experiencing as far as my depression, because my birth with her was extremely traumatic. It was heartbreaking. I was hungry. I was tired. There was so much blood everywhere. I felt like, during the day, I was actually in for so many days that it got to a point where once her dad realized that she wasn't going to be born, he went to work, came out, and I was still in labor. So it was a lot for me. And then when she was finally born, she went straight to the NICU, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, I didn't even get a chance to breastfeed. I didn't get a chance to do any of this. And I was so exhausted. They had to scrape my placenta out because it wasn't coming out. I was trembling by the end of it all. And then I look at her, and I was depressed. I was happy, but I felt like I didn't even recognize her. And I was like, oh my God, how am I supposed to care for her? How am I supposed to, do this? If she's sick, what am I supposed to do? So that it just fed more into what was happening. And then it was over. And I wasn't it's almost like there was no reason for me and her dad to be that close anymore. It's like there was no reason for him to pay attention to me anymore because I was no longer pregnant. And now the child was on the outside. And now he really didn't need me for anything because he could just pick her up and do what he had to do with her. So then it created this sense of, oh my God, have I been in an incubator this whole time? And this wasn't because of anything he did. It was just me. These are my feelings and what I was going through. So I had this feeling that I wasn't good for anything anymore. And I fell really behind the scenes. So I'm trying to breastfeed. And it was the most unhygienic week of my life, by the way, that she was in the NICU, because I was discharged from the hospital and she wasn't. The place where I was living was about half an hour on a good day from the hospital. She needed to be breastfed every 2 hours. I was not successfully pumping, and God, nobody tells you how long it's supposed to take for your milk to come in. And of course, me being natural and great and all this other wonderful stuff, I didn't want her to have formula. So I was like, no, she is absolutely going to breastfeed. And so I spent round the clock hooked up to this machine with, that pumped me like a cow. And because I had literally, they tell you this, I had undesirable nipples for breastfeeding. Tell a mom that just spent 4 days in labor pushing out a kid she hasn't even had an opportunity to hold because now she's in some phototherapy box with a blindfold on. You can only hold her for half an hour at a time. That she has undesirable nipples, and see where that gets you. So after everything was said and done, she came out fine. She was having some struggles with her bilirubin levels, and she was very small. But after all the initial struggle was out, I took her home, and she was okay. Actually, that first week, I was still kind of in and out of doctor's appointments, but it turned out to be okay. And still, I felt like I was trapped. I spent all day in bed with my postpartum panties on and basically wearing a flippin' diaper to soak up whatever mess I was in. I was terrified to take a shower. My skin didn't feel my own. I felt foreign. Oh my God, I can't even begin to describe how I felt those first couple of days. And then I was going back and forth to go back to the place where I was living so that way we could spend some time with her dad. I really wanted her dad to bond with her. And I hadn't accustomed myself to the fact that we weren't living together because it just didn't seem like that's what was supposed to happen. You don't have a baby and then have to move out from being together. You should be together. And I never let go of that feeling. So after I came to terms with that, actually, I don't really think that I came to terms with that, honestly, because for the first year of her life, I was bouncing back and forth to wherever he was to try to get us to be together as much as possible. And we were not in a good place at all. And so I was struggling with the failure of my relationship. I felt like I was a failure as a mom because I couldn't manage to stay in this relationship, and I didn't know what I had done wrong to not be in that relationship, and I didn't know where we stood, and I didn't know how to make things better, and I just didn't. Okay, I didn't know nothing. And that was a lot for me to take in. So, and then my baby's losing weight because my milk wasn't coming in fast enough. My mom was like pumping me full of horchata, té de ajonjolí, which is like a sesame seed thing, tea, chocolate water, which is supposed to like up your game. And then my aunt was like, don't eat aguacate, don't eat avocado. Don't eat avocado or black beans because it's gonna make your milk sour and the baby's not gonna want it. So obviously, as is when somebody tells you that you can't have something, that's all I wanted to eat. So I